Good afternoon, everyone. You might notice I'm wearing my homage to Seurat dress today. So I'm just going to very briefly say a couple of words about Michael Petry exhibition upstairs, which hopefully you'll have a chance to glance at as you go up to Seurat after Tom's talk. So this installation consists of three parts. It's a new piece commissioned from an American artist called Michael Petry, who has created a glass ley line which runs the length of the ballroom table. So the ley line piece is inspired by the history of Bath, particularly the ancient history of Bath. So it's inspired by historic ley lines. The term ley lines may or may not be familiar to you, but it's the idea that historic sites are sort of linked in a kind of perhaps mythical or mythological way, so that you can actually connect them with straight lines. So if you look at the Earth from above, you can see that lots of ancient Britain's sites of great importance, you can actually sort of join them in a network of sort of lines, and they all kind of align together. That's the kind of references that Petry has been interested in Holborn, and he's particularly interested in some of the ley lines in the city of Bath, the most famous being the one that runs between the Royal Crescent and the Circus. And so his piece is a response to that. It's made from 16 pieces of sand-cast glass, which are created by effectively pouring molten glass into a mould made from wet sand. The sand holds its shape, allowing you to create the forms within it. And you'll notice on some of the pieces that Petry has deliberately left it quite rough with sand visible, creating that connection to the earth from which the pieces have come. I've mentioned the sort of mythological connections and mythical connections, and actually one of the other things to say about Michael Petry's work is that his own mythology is often at the centre of the work. So what you're actually seeing in the ley line is a sort of a line that he's created with his hand in the sand, which has then been cast. So he sees himself at the centre of all his work. That's one way of putting it. And one of the things that's quite striking about it is that although the pieces are made from glass, they seem to kind of gather the light in quite an extraordinary way. So on that black table, it's got a real presence even on such a miserable day as today. So the other two pieces in the gallery are made a constellation of Virgo in the corner behind the Crouching Venus by Susini, and also a string of pearls hanging from the ceiling at the other end of the gallery. And for Petry, he's selected those pieces to display here because of the connections that you can see to our collection, and again, those stories about mythology, representation of women in art, and other ideas. So there are three things to look out for in the gallery. And just one final thing I forgot to say about the ley line is that it's actually made in collaboration with students from the College of Art, who would usually not have the opportunity to make sort of glass on such a large scale, and as it's sort of very expensive process to do. And the final element of collaboration involved in making that piece was that the cold work, so done after the glass was set and kind of cooled, was done by an artist called Fiaz Elson, who cut each piece to the exact dimensions so that it would fit along the length of the table and polish those as well. So I think that's all I want to say about the exhibition, but I hope you enjoy it and you'll go up to see the other show as well.
Yes, I've just come from there.
Yeah.
Where was it actually made?
So it was made at Acton College. It was, yes. So that's where the casting took place, where effectively Michael created that pathway along the sort of 7 3/4 metre length of the table, and the cold work was done with
And somebody asked that where was it?
Yeah. Okay, well, I shall now hand over to Tom and hope you enjoy it.
Right, hello everyone. So Seurat O'Reilly is our newest exhibition on the top floor. Opens tomorrow and runs until the 21st of January. and it's all about optical illusions. It's about what you might or might not see in some of the artworks, but it's also about an explosion of colour. There's some very colourful works up there, so hopefully it provides a tonic to miserable-looking days like today outside. This is the graphic that is sort of the public face of the exhibition. You will have seen it on the banners when you came in, and looking sort of suitably autumnal and Halloween-y. But it's drawing on two distinct elements of the exhibition, which you'll see very shortly. So the exhibition was curated by our colleagues at Compton Verney in Warwickshire, who we've worked with before on the Canaletto exhibition a couple of years ago, which was one of the most successful exhibitions we've had here until Bruegel earlier this year. And they had, I think, 22,000 visitors there, and they had some good press coverage as well. The Sunday Times had a very glowing review, as did a number of other papers. So that all bodes very well. The exhibition at Compton Verney was spread across about five galleries, so it was a large show, and we're taking a highlights show. So some of their, particularly some of their enormous works. There was one that was the size of that wall, and it had various moving parts. There was actually a bike behind it which you pedalled, and various things moved. We couldn't fit it in the lift, so we don't have that. This is a highlight show, but it includes all the major works. As well as what's going on in the Roper and the Worth, we have 6 temporary labels that have been added to the permanent collection in the Ballroom, Picture Gallery, the Posnick Gallery and the Fletcher Gallery, and they have been written by a psychology tutor at the University of Bath. So the University of Bath we have a long connection with, and they have sponsored the exhibition, but they also wanted to get involved in some of the interpretation. So those labels are picking up on some of the sort of illusionistic elements to things that we've got going on outside the gallery and the temporary gallery space, and sort of drawing links between that permanent collection and between the exhibition. So I hope you enjoy those. They've all been sort of branded the same visual identity as the poster there, so visitors should be able to recognise them. And so, yeah, the exhibition is all about op art, optical art, and it's all about playing on viewers' perceptions and misleading the brain. That's what the art is there to do. Sometimes creating a sense of movement, sometimes creating a sense of colour. I think what we'll find is that everybody who goes in there will see something different, and that's good. That's how it's supposed to be. But what I'll try to do today is to give you a sense of what the artists were trying to do with each artwork, and I'll tell you what I can see, but what you can see might be different, and that's good. That's how it's supposed to be. The first section of the exhibition, it's called Impression and Colour, and it deals with the early influences to what ultimately would become op art in the 20th century. And the key figure who really stands out in terms of 19th century influences is Georges Seurat, and we've got 2 works by him in the exhibition. This is the Morning Walk, which the National Gallery has lent, and it's one of a number of landscape sketches which Seurat was doing in the 1880s, some of which were paintings in their own right, others were sketches that went on to be the studies that informed larger landscape paintings. And this is the latter. It was a sketch that then became a larger painting of the Seine, which Seurat completed. And it's pointillism, which is the point of these works, including these works, and the fact that Seurat and some of his contemporaries were playing around with dashes of colour and dashes of surprising colours, which you, as the viewer, optically mixing your eye to see the finished result, rather than the artist mixing it and putting it on canvas. And when you look at this close too in the exhibition, you'll see the sort of precise and very different colours which are in there to make up what, when you stand back, looks like a solid massive colour. He was also, he's often referred to as a post-impressionist, but he was also using quite an impressionistic form of painting as well. So the red dashes you can see at the top of the painting represent the red tile roofs of the houses on the other side of the bank. And again, it's something that you can look back and sort of work out what that is, and then when you get close, you see that it's not what it looked like at all. The other work by Seurat is La Luzerne, which is on the left. And here we're displaying it very deliberately next to Ecclesia by Bridget Riley from 1985. So Riley is possibly the name that people most associate with op art, even though it's a term that she doesn't identify with herself. Don't say op art in front of her, she doesn't like. But she herself has said that pointillism was a key influence on her, and that Seurat's La Luzerne specifically informed this painting, Ecclesia. And what she's done is she's borrowed some of the palette that he used in terms of colours, but she's also used that idea of colours that you're sort of doing the hard work. You're seeing it rather than she's painting it. And I mean that in the sense that whereas with pointillism, it is again dashes of colour like Morning Walk, which together form the image. Here, the idea with Riley is that, and you'll see when you see the artwork upstairs, some of these colours are the same, but you may not see them as the same because it's the colour it's next to which informs and changes the colour that adjoins it. And she's exploiting that in terms of forming these striped paintings for which she became very well known. Another key influence which we cover in this section is the contribution of the vortices. So in the early 20th century, led by Wyndham Lewis, the vortices were responding to change in the early 20th century. They were trying to capture the energy of the modern world, and it's that they tried to reflect in abstract painting and use of jarring colours, such as, for example, on the left, which we borrowed from Tate. And as the 20th century moved on, you'll notice this was painted during the First World War, the vortices, their work increasingly became associated with the power and destruction of mechanised and modern conflict during that period, I think because of the jarring quality of it. So very different to op art, but use of colour and implied movement as well. They were often painting architecture or human figure in an abstract form. But both colour and movement are ideas that get picked up later as part of the op art movement. So that's why she's there, and it's nice that we've got her represented as one of only a few of the female vorticist artists, which adds a nice kind of narrative to the whole exhibition, because, of course, if you think of op art, Riley is thought of as one of the chief movers, so it's nice to have these women artists represented and not just their male counterparts. On the right is Olber's Untitled Abstraction, and here you see him playing around with geometry, again an idea that would be picked up in the 1960s by the op artists. So you might not be able to see, and this goes for a number of the images here, you might not be able to get the full effect from an image, but when you go upstairs and see them, hopefully you will. But on the right there, Olber's has played around with uniform squares of the same shape, all of them diamonds on their side, some are red, some are white, and then he's drawn on top of that a series of circles, which are in effect distorting the image underneath the circle, in much the same way that a bubble floating by might distort what you see behind it. So he was playing with how geometrical forms can influence what you see when put in certain combinations. Olbers himself is also an interesting artist and chap in his own right. He emigrated from Germany in the 1930s to the US, and he's considered to be a key figure in bringing modernism to the USA in the 1950s and 1960s, and he's a name that crops up throughout this exhibition, including here. So on the left is Olbers again, this time in 1942, experimenting with how simple line forms could be drawn in such a way as to imply depth. So on the left there, some of you might see some of it as coming towards you, others might see other bits as going away from you, you might see a combination of the two, and he's done all that just by the use of a line. And what's interesting, pairing it with the Riley, is to show how, to what extent she was influenced by him in her early career. So the painting on the right there from 1961 is one of her earliest works. Between 1960 and 1961, she was teaching at the Hornsey College of Art, and that's known to be the period where her op art began. And clearly there is a very close resemblance to Olber's work 2 decades previously. So moving on to the second section of the exhibition, this explores much more closely when op art really happened. And that's 1965, which was an exhibition called The Responsive Eye at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And it was this sort of bringing together of these artists who were all playing with optical illusions, which coalesced into sort of art movement that became known as op art. In 1965, and in this section, black and white and the contrast between the two is what was really explored. There's such extreme colours that putting the two together in various patterns and forms was what they used in order to create these illusions. Hopefully some our visitors won't find some of them too uncomfortable to look at, but it is about causing visual disturbances. Fingers crossed on that one. If you do find anyone who's feeling a bit queasy, if they happen to have their sunglasses on them, see if putting those on makes any difference. So at that exhibition in 1965 at Responsive Eye, sunglasses were actually handed out at the entrance to the exhibition for everybody to wear as they went round, because there was a feeling that that actually helped people to view some of the artworks. So have that up your sleeve if necessary. This is Zebra by Vasarely. It's actually before 1965. It dates from the 1930s, but it's the first artwork that went on to be referred to as op art. So it's a key work, we've borrowed this version from the British Museum, and the object is entirely in 2D. It's in one plane, and he's created the sense of a relief sculptural form of the zebra just by his use of the line drawing and then the distortions that he's added in certain precise and exact areas. So that's really the sort of starting point of the frame. And then these are some of the works that are associated with its sort of heyday in the 1960s. So Fall on the right by Riley is probably the one I find most difficult to look at. I'm fine initially, but look at it too much and I just start to get a bit queasy. It's got this sort of incredible sense of tension, which she's created by using these perpendicular black lines on a white background close together, and what starts off as a sort of gentle curve at the top becomes more and more compressed at the bottom to create that tension. But the other thing it does is it creates colour, and I'm not sure whether you're getting it from an image, but you certainly get it when you stand in front of the object. The remarkable thing though is that everybody seems to see a different colour. I mean, I've tended to see a sort of pinky colour, but colleagues have seen yellow, green, every possible colour, and combinations of colour as well. All created, none of it's on the surface, all of it is created in the mind's eye. And then that's displayed upstairs alongside a couple of other key works by Riley. So on the left is Blaze, which is quite well known. And she's created this just by repeating the same form of that same design of sort of black and white sections together. They just increasingly the angles narrowed, they've become smaller and they become tighter towards the centre of the object, and then we've got the central aperture. And the effect is this sort of blaze of light that comes from the centre. But people do also see colour there as well. And then on the right is her study for pause. So the finished painting Pause looks like this, but this side is complete. And it looks like two cylinders which are turning into the centre of the page and away from the viewer. But what's fascinating about this is that you're seeing the drawing that led to it. So you're seeing her artistic process in how she actually created it. And what's fascinating is it's all quite geometric and precise. It's not, something that is a sort of illusion of this turning. It's actually very almost straightforward. She's drawn a grid where the squares become, again, it's much clearer upstairs, the squares become narrower as you go into the centre of the picture, and then they broaden out to the end. And the reason for that is that she fills it when it's a full square with a circle, but then as the square becomes squashed, the circles become ellipses, and so it's the ellipses that the shape is becoming into the centre of the object, which is making you think that the thing is turning and then moving away from it. The other object on the left there is Michael Kidner's Multiple, dates from 1965, and that in itself, I mean, I find it quite a sort of light-hearted poke at op art, because it is op art. It's in the customary black and white decoration. It's got these curves to the decoration which change as you move. So if you move whilst you're looking at it in front of it, you'll see that depending on your angle of the work, the extent of the curvature changes. But he's then confused all of that by the fact that the work itself is a piece of perspex, which is bending. So it's in fact a piece of sculpture. It's not a piece of flat art. But the two things together, the real curvature and then the perceived curvature, adds together to create something that's just totally confusing. So that's quite fun. And then the final works on this section are the two large works on the back wall. On the left, it's Geoffrey Steele's Harlequinade, and on the right, it's Vasarely's Tamir. And they're both concerned with motion. So Steele on the left is using, again, precise geometric forms, but in various combinations, and the overall effect in the way that black and white decoration mimics each other on each side gives you a sense of the thing turning. It is also displayed as a diamond. One of the ways that we benefited from the fact that the exhibition went to Compton Verney first was that they sorted all that out. When it arrived, they thought it was a square, but it is actually designed as a diamond. And then Vasarely on this side has basically used the idea of the sails of a windmill rotating around a central point which is there. But by using asymmetry and distortion, he's created the sense that the thing might actually be moving. You need to stand back to look at it to see whether you agree or not. But that's the idea. They're both showing this kind of spiralling motion. Vasarely really is key. He's a name that will crop up alongside Riley in each section of the exhibition because he is one of the main practitioners and one of the main names that people identify with op art. He was Hungarian, but a number of the titles of his works are taken from geographical features in Russia. So Tamir, the name of the painting on the right, is named after a lake and a river in northern Russia. So from monochrome we go on to colour. So the idea was that, as I say, black and white together were seen to provide some of the strongest colour contrast. So that's what people were really exploring in the 1960s. But very soon after, these artists also realised that colour had a role to play as well, and that just as many contrasts and just as many effects could be created by the use of colour. And that's really what creates in this exhibition a real riot of colour in the second section. This is sort of the first work in the section, and it shows Riley's sort of definitive move away from black and white in 1968, when she produced this work Untitled, which shows a clear debt to her previous work. It's still playing around with squiggly lines, but the use of colour, here she's used sort of combination of different reds, blues and greys, adds to the sense in which there's something moving. And when you look at the piece in the flesh upstairs, it gives it this sort of undulating, pulsing quality, as if there's waves moving across the surface of the page. It's remarkable, really. So this really signals her move away from black and white. But like Paul's earlier, the study for Paul's, this is a drawing. Again, not particularly clear here, but you'll see it upstairs. And it's really fascinating in terms of giving us an insight into how she made this. So along the top there are some numbers, and there are some numbers along the bottom, I think, from memory. And then on the left, a series of wavy lines, but it's all on graph paper, so you can see how she's plotted out the sort of trajectory of each line. And then, of course, when it starts to become the finished item, you can see how she inserted the colour between which lines she does. And it's fascinating, really. Vasarely, so these are his experimentations with colour. And he sort of ended up using colour so much and playing around with its different qualities that he even patented a name for his experimentations, which was planetary folklore, where he was experimenting with what he could achieve with colours. But there's still that underlying simplicity that I think is evident in other elements of art. So on the left there, you're seeing really experimentations with a square. That's all it is in its many forms. All he's done is he's varied the extent to which the square has been sort of squashed, as though sort of semi-squashed square, and then below it, it's become a sort of full diamond shape. And he's done that to varying degrees. It's not uniform, it's not symmetrical. And he's used red with different shades, so you've got sort of purple, maybe, almost maybe quality, that goes to red, and down here we've got an orange quality. And he's then cited each of those squares within a green square of a different shade. And the overall effect is this sort of, well, almost pyramid feeling when you look at work. But towards the end of his career, he also became interested in the sort of sculptural possibilities to sort of tease the eye. So in 1988, he produced this sculpture, which is a sort of continuation of what he was doing on the left, but an elaboration of it. What you're seeing there is 2D, it's entirely on one plane, that decoration. The object, though, is in the round, so you'll be able to see the way it's displayed. You can see the decoration on the back as well, which is similar. But the perception of it having a sort of multifaceted surface, it's all been created by the shape of the squares that he's used and the colours that he's used on them. And it's very striking. It's sort of it's acrylic paint on wood, and the colours look incredibly fresh. So it's quite a sort of striking element to the exhibition, I think. The final works, and again they're sort of big major works, they're some of the largest in there. In this colour section are Albers and Sedgley. So Albers on the left is his homage to the square. You'll possibly recognise that from the poster and the exhibition ID, where we sort of put together Albers' experimentation with orange squares with Riley's black and white scribbles. So that was the inspiration behind that. And we've done something quite fun on the landing in terms of we've taken the poster and we've actually sort of blown it up on the landing, and your ticket desk is part of the poster. It's the orange square. You'll see when you get up there, but that in itself is sort of a bit of trickery. I hope not too much. Don't look at it when you're going up the stairs. But that's where Albers was playing around with squares within squares, which was something he was doing a lot. He produced a number of artworks into the thousands, I think, which were all experimentations with the square. And here, again, it's sort of simplicity itself. It's just three forms, three squares. They're all the same. They're just different sizes, and slightly different colours. And again, for some of you, you might see it coming towards you. Others might see it going away from you. But it's all about creating that artificial depth. And then on the right here, I mean, Sedgley's an interesting chap, and this painting sort of throws all the ideas out the window and puts them on their head and brings them back in. But it's interesting nonetheless. So whereas all the other artists were looking at ways in which tricking your eye makes your brain see something that isn't there, Sedgley wasn't concerned with that. He just wanted to trick your eyes. And a number of his paintings, this included, were sort of labelled the out-of-focus paintings, because he was specifically creating something that it's difficult for the eye to find a purchase on. You don't know which bit to sort of look at. And it ends up giving this overall impression of the thing being out of focus, whilst also having this sort of clearly sort of emanating light halo effect, all of which is on a black ground, which really compounds that. So that's Sedgley. In the exhibition that was at Compton Verney, they had a series of the out-of-focus paintings together, so you could see what he was doing in its entirety. And the publication which accompanies this exhibition looks like this, and it's been written by the curators at Compton Verney who did the show, which were Penny Sexton and Francis Folan. And it's a great guide to op art in its entirety. It covers the objects in our exhibition, but it also covers the objects that were in the fuller exhibition at Compton Verney. So if you want to see some other examples of Sedgley's out-of-focus paintings, then they're illustrated in that guide. The final picture within this colour section is Carlos Cruz Diaz's Physichromy. It's been written in various different ways and mispronounced in various different ways, but I hope I got that right. And this is the one that really kind of invites the most audience participation. So do encourage visitors to have some fun with this. Again, I don't even know how they took this image because it doesn't actually relate to what you would see if that work was there and you were there now. But he's painted it by basically painting this black barcode-like image on a white ground. And that's at the back of the painting. And then just in front of it is a series of coloured frames, which is what you're seeing here, which are long strips of different colours, which obscure the image at the back from you. And it means that you get a different image where you are. So if you look at it and walk past it, you'll see the image change as you move. You'll also get a particularly good view of it if you come, if there is a barrier up there in the middle. So if you come up to the barrier at sort of this distance to the work, or on the other side, and you look at it at a 45-degree angle, then you'll see through the frames, you'll see the image of one of its most clearest things. So that's quite fun and fascinating. But Cruz Diaz is interesting for two other reasons as well. First, the date, 1993. I mean, it really shows the extent to which op art wasn't just a 60s phenomenon, and it's carried on being something that artists have been interested in and they wanted to continue creating these illusions. And the other thing is that he was Venezuelan, so it really illustrates the fact that we're not talking about just a European or American art form. This was something that had global appeal. The final section within the Roper Gallery, it looks at op art in the current day, so contemporary artists who are still looking at some of these ideas around optical illusions and playing with viewers in terms of what you're seeing. Riley is represented in this section, which is great because, of course, she is still very much, was very much producing work through the 20th century and into the 21st century. And this piece here is a print taken from a much larger mural called After Rajasthan. The colours were inspired by, the oranges and the greens, were inspired by colours in Rajasthan in northwest India. And although you can definitely see the ways in which she moved on from the 60s and the 80s, it's still the same ideas of colour and perception of movement and depth, which she's playing around with there. That's next to this colourful work by Jim Lamy, painted in 2014. Now, this was taken from some time he spent in Antigua and represents a sort of colourful sunrise or sunset, presumably sunrise, I think. And again, you know, very much playing, picking up on and playing with some of the ideas that op artists have used in the past in terms of use of colour and sense of movement. But he's also in a very particular way picking up on op art, and that's with this bird up here, who is a tropic bird that is typical of Antigua. That's the reason that's there. But the way it links into op art is there was an idea amongst the op artists that their work only truly exists when there's someone in front of it to perceive it or misperceive it, as it were. You know, the act of seeing the object is key to the object itself, because they want it to be they want what you see to be an optical illusion. And he's sort of playing that idea by including that bird as really something that's standing in for the viewer. So there is a viewer constantly there, present with the painting. So that was his idea behind including that. And then this section also looks at a ceramic artist, Sarah Morehouse, who has been producing work. I mean, the pieces we have date from 2004 to 2013. They're earthenware ceramics, but again, she's using colour and line decoration to, in this instance, both on the inside of her vessels and on the outside, to use that decoration to either flatten or exaggerate the curve of the vessel itself. So she's sort of buying into that whole idea that the decoration and the line decoration will change what you see. She's also, in some of her sort of colours, the sort of rustic greens, oranges, things like that, she's been inspired by landscape. But you can hear more about that from Sarah herself, because she'll be doing one of the talks as part of our current What's On programme. So it's 17th of January, and she'll be doing an in-conversation with Chris Stevens, our new director, on more about her sort of artistic practice and her approach. So do look out for that if you'd like to know more about that. I should mention, actually, whilst I mention What's On, that Francis Folin, who was one of the co-curators of the show with Compton Burney, is doing a talk on the 16th of November on Riley. So there's another one there that if you're interested in finding out more, that's one of the opportunities to do so. With these plots, I'll add that we've displayed them in perspex boxes in the gallery, which have a sort of floating effect, but it also means that you can see, because of their position, we haven't put them too high, you can see both in and the outside. So hopefully that'll add to people's enjoyment of it. And then the final artist within this section in the Roper Gallery is Lothar Gotz, who's known for larger sort of site-specific commissions. He decorated a whole room at Compton Burney, for example, but he also did an artwork, a striped line decoration that I think was in the floor area of Tate Britain. But here we've included 5 drawings by him, which really illustrate how his practice is rooted in drawing and in precise observation. These are 3 of them. They all date from 2015 to 2017. And I think, again, it's really useful to illustrate how something that's being produced now is a clear deck to sort of geometrical experimenting of the op artists in the 1960s. And certainly the one in the middle there sort of screams 1960s to me. So that sort of illustrates the ongoing way in which op art is still something that's very current at the moment. Now, the exhibition is across the road for and the Worth, so in the Worth Gallery we've got a particular theme, which is the way in which there's been a sort of cultural crossover from art as an art form in its own right into popular culture, which is one of the reasons, I think, for its long-standing appeal. So whether that's sort of in design, fashion, music, domestic wares, there is a sort of long tradition of seeing this form of decoration on these art forms. So one of the areas we look at is domestic wear. This is a vase that Vasarely produced in the 1970s. It's alongside another of his vases from the same period, and really ties in with Vasarely's view that he didn't want art to be a sort of elitist thing, which was a picture on a wall that only people who could access it or informed about it could enjoy it. He wanted it to be something that was in people's homes and was more accessible. Music is the sort of next key area where op art's had a sort of enduring impact. So on the right there you're seeing, it's a 2000 remastered version, but it's of a 1960s Bowie album, where he's used a Vasarely print as the background to the album. And if you think back to Banya and some of those geometric multicoloured shapes that Vasarely was playing around with, here he's transported that into circles, but really using very similar ideas to some of his previous work. And this was something that very much appealed to Bowie and was sort of immortalised on that album cover. But again, op art isn't something that's just confined to the 1960s. So on the left there, we've got a Soul Wax album from 2004, which shows again that this was still a very popular form of decoration. So for those of you in the back row, you can probably make out that there's some text on the left. It's the title of the album, Any Minute Now, whereas those of you in the front probably can't see that. Good, brilliant. So, so when you're upstairs in the gallery, you'll be able to sort of come close or go back in order to see it. But I still have no idea how they actually made this. So whereas with Riley, it's relatively well. The thing is, when you're very close to it and you see upstairs, there's no interruption in the design. It looks solid. So how you see beyond that when you're further away, I don't know. But yeah, it's one of 2 Soul Wax albums that are upstairs, and the second one isn't dots. The second one is diagonal lines. So they've somehow managed to create the same sensation through diagonal lines. So that's music, and then the final element to this sort of cultural theme in the Worth Gallery, and the point on which I'll end, is the Olympics and this sort of lasting connection between op art and the Olympics. So in 1968 in Mexico, in 1972 for Munich, and in 1988 for Seoul, all three of those posters were done by op artists, two of them by Vasarely. And I think in 1968, that's fine, you can understand that. It was a hip, current, very popular art form at the time. But the fact that it was still considered to be all of those things 2 decades later, in the 1980s, I think gives a sense of this enduring quality and appeal and fascination by audiences with op art. And that in itself is taken one step further by the fact that when Bridget Riley was asked to produce a poster for the London Olympics in 2012, she, again, drew on this long heritage of op art in Olympic posters, and she produced this work on the right called Rose Rose. She's essentially turned the stripes the other way around. In all her other paintings they go up and down, and in this they're horizontal. The idea being, I think, that it better represents people swimming in a lane or people running across an athletics track. I mean, it took me a while to really think, really, does it, just because you've turned them 90 degrees? But if you think about how you might watch the 100-metre sprint finish on the TV, of course, they show it, and they're reaching the line. The line is on the sort of right of your TV, and they're coming at it from that direction and going that way. And that seems to be the idea that she's borrowed here. But in all other respects, it's incredibly similar to her earlier work, sort of Achilles 1980s at the beginning of the exhibition, where it's playing around with the colours that you're seeing. And one orange, because it's next to a blue line, looks different to an orange which is next to a green line. And so she's still, this is 40 years on, she's still, these are still very current themes in these objects as in terms of their sort of art historical place within op art. I'll stop there and leave you to enjoy the works themselves upstairs with Josh. But if there's any questions, do feel free to ask. Right.
Yeah, so you're getting sort of like scientific, it's a lot of this is based on science.
Yeah.
Is there going to be any focus? The first thing I think is
Well, hopefully the labels will help people to a certain extent, as will the catalogue. We are exploring the science elements as part of our events. So those additional labels in the permanent galleries, which were written by Michael Petry, the psychology department, he'll be doing a lecture here as part of the programme. That's in January. I need to check the exact date, 11th of January. Alongside those labels in the permanent galleries, we're also putting something in the Stewart's files, which has got a lot more science in it. Too much for the labels, and it includes references to some of the works that he cited. But it's there so that if people want to know more, you can give that information out. And then our up late in either October or November, thank you, Josh, that is going to be a science cafe. So that's going to be looking with University of Bath at the sort of science element to all of this and how it works. When you enter the exhibition, one of the first graphics is on the eye and the various elements to that, written by a neurosurgeon, I think. So hopefully that will set the sort of context. But yes, I think there will be quite a lot of science and
So just about on the right, mentioning the geographic.
oh, right, yeah.
So sometimes the lines going to different place.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's when you think about kind of the sort of vintage nature of the tube map, you can see the link into sort of 60s rock art and things like that. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, it's more. I'd say it's more op-like. So when you're in the Worth Gallery, look at the Mexico Olympic poster, because that I think has got quite a lot of similarities to the tube map. Whereas the pointlists, I think, are more sort of cited alongside Impressionism as that kind of fluidly, kind of less precise sort of thing. Absolutely. I mean, in the sense that optical illusions and op art were all born from the post-impressionist, post-thinker series. Right. Well, enjoy.